Scotsman Kenneth Richey is due to die in the electric chair, yet his defence has never been heard by a jury.
It will be good for justice in Ohio when we start actually imposing the penalty that we said we were going to impose.
Richey maintains he's innocent, but time is running out.
It's hell being on death row, period. It's a great deal harder when you're innocent.
We finally got the evidence through hard work to prove that he's innocent, and we can't get anybody to listen.
Lucasville Correctional Center, Ohio. This is the chair in which Kenny Richey will sit and draw his last breath, the electric chair. It hasn't been used since the 60s, but Ohio's political leaders have pledged that this year they will begin killing the men on their death row. One of the first could be convicted murderer Kenny Richey. For 11 years, he's protested his innocence, but the Ohio courts say he should still die.
They don't care if a man's guilty or innocent. They can get the conviction, go for it. And they'll use any means possible to get it.
Back home in Scotland, family and friends refuse to give up on Kenny Richey. Karen Tolley is the unlikely champion of a man she's never met. Her campaign was inspired after the last British man, Nick Ingram, went to the electric chair 3 years ago.
Nick Ingram's body left jail amid cheers and taunts.
I saw on the news about Nicholas Ingram, and it really upset me and disturbed me. You know, the next day, there were lots of news in the newspaper about it, and there was a piece about Kenny. So I was so angry, I wrote to Kenny and said, you know, is there anything I can do to help? Thinking I could write some letters or something. You know, I never expected things to get as big as they got.
Have you ever been in the dark and you can't find a light and you're alone, blind, and then a little ray of light comes in and you begin to see the way? Well, that little ray of light is Karen.
Karen's leaving Glasgow to make an 8,000-mile journey to re-examine the evidence that convicted Kenny Richey.
Sometimes I think, you know, what's the point? And I'm never going to listen. You know, but I think it's the right thing to do to keep on fighting.
For 3 years, Karen's been writing to the American courts, trying to convince them they've made a mistake. But time is running out to win a retrial and save Kenny Richey from that final walk to the chair and a date with the executioner.
What I would really like to do in Ohio is raise awareness for this case. I've been thinking about the support that nanny, Louise Woodward, got. You know, and Kenny doesn't have that support. And I believe that if Kenny did get that kind of support, you know, that just perhaps one of these courts will listen.
It's the first time that Karen has met the Richey family.
Well, hello, Karen. How are you? Oh, finally we meet.
Yeah.
Kenny's dad, Jim, was an American soldier based in Scotland. He met and married a local girl, Eileen. Kenny was born in 1965 and spent his first 17 years living in Edinburgh. A troubled adolescence led to brushes with the law and a series of minor charges, mostly for shoplifting. By his mid-teens, Kenny's parents had split and his dad returned to America. Kenny followed, joined the Marines and got married. But neither lasted long.
He loved the party, and he did take drugs, light drugs, I would say. There was nothing heavy on it, but He just wanted to have a good time and forget the future or what the future would hold for him.
My opinion is that they should have the death sentence and it should be carried out and there shouldn't be so many appeals. I have talked with...
Karen Tolley's campaign starts at a local radio station. But she and Jim find little sympathy for a man on death row who claims he's innocent.
Kenny did not have a fair trial.
Well, he did have
no,
a fair
he didn't.
trial.
He did not have a fair trial.
Ma'am, you weren't there.
There were witnesses, there was evidence that was not submitted, and with all this evidence, no one will listen to it. You know, why can't you people say that, you know, mistakes are made? You know, judges are human beings.
If you're not going to play by society's rules, you take the punishment. You know, be it the death penalty. Hey, I mean, sometime we've got to start initiating some of the punishment that comes with the crime to give people something to think about.
In America, as in Britain, Kenny Richey ran into trouble with the police, spending 30 days in the county jail for brandishing a knife. After his release, he went to live with his father at the old farm apartments in Columbus Grove.
Where were you living? You know,
I lived at the very back apartment building, C building, which is the very last one.
In the summer of '86, the apartment blocks were notorious for their 24-hour drink and drug parties. It was after one of these parties that Kenny Richey was accused of arson, starting a fire that took the life of a neighbor's daughter, 3-year-old Cynthia Collins. The prosecution claimed he was in a jealous rage with a former girlfriend who was in bed with another man. The state said he set fire to the building to get revenge.
The prosecution theory was that Kenny had stolen 2 cans of petrol and paint thinner, brought them across here to this shed. He climbed upon the shed with the 2 cans, stood up, got over the banister, opened the sliding glass door, spread the paint thinner and petrol on the carpet, ignited it, and then retreated the same way it came.
The defense claimed that was physically impossible because Richey had broken his right hand in a recent fight. However, the prosecution insisted that he was still able to scale the shed roof carrying the cans of paint thinner and petrol, then disconnect the apartment's smoke alarm. Cynthia Collins, who'd been abandoned by her mother while she went to another party, was killed in the fire. The couple sleeping in the flat below escaped unhurt.
7 of Putnam County, we are at the scene.
When the ITV program This Week reported on the case 5 years ago, the prosecution maintained the conviction was safe.
The fire marshal's office in their investigation found the presence of both accelerants on the porch and in the rug that was taken out of the apartment complex. We had an elderly woman who testified that after the fire, while they were throwing some trash out or a burnt chair, he made the statement, "I guess I did a hell of a good job, didn't I?"
The death of a child meant feelings were running high. Richey's lawyer advised him to waive his right to trial by jury. Instead, a panel of 3 judges heard the case. But they were told how only weeks earlier, Kenny Richey's brother Tom had been convicted of murder. The family believed that if Kenny was to have a fair trial, this should not have been put before the court. Convicted, he was led away to death row, grinning defiantly.
I was raised with the belief that American justice was the greatest justice in the world, and I had a deep faith in that. And it was completely destroyed after that trial and after what I found out.
Karen is searching for other possible explanations for the fire that cost little Cynthia Collins her life.
There it is.
The official cause of the fire is still undetermined. However, preliminary reports indicate that the fire was electrical in nature.
At first, no one thought there was anything suspicious about the fire that killed Cynthia. It was simply an accident. The burnt-out apartment was stripped and the carpet taken to the local dump. It was only 36 hours later, when officers started gathering evidence of a possible arson, that the vital evidence was retrieved. Then, breaking every rule in handling evidence, the carpet was rolled out on the car park, behind the sheriff's office, right in front of the pump where patrol cars are refueled. Petrol was later found on the carpet. At the trial, the prosecution used the evidence to support their theory that the fire was started deliberately.
We wish it hadn't happened, but when the fire was brought to the attention of the authorities, there was no indication that it was incendiary in origin, presumably a routine fire, and it was only after the fire marshal was called and the case was investigated a little further that it came to light that it might be an arson.
There was clear evidence that the carpet may have been contaminated accidentally, but the fire marshal claimed that forensic tests showed the fire must have been started deliberately. The state's crime laboratory had not only found petrol on the carpet, but also detected traces of paint thinners all around the apartment. No one challenged his opinion.
We have a victim inside, It's been reported. Dispatch the unit.
The state's experts said the carpet had a classic burn mark or pour pattern where the flammable liquid had been splashed. The sheer speed and ferocity of the fire showed it must have been arson. He claimed there was no other likely cause.
I am convinced this was an arson, and I am convinced that the defendant committed it.
Professor Richard Custer instructs the FBI how to investigate arson. He believes that the local fire marshal drew the wrong conclusions, and there are now good reasons to believe that Kenny Richey may not be responsible.
Many investigators just have not been adequately trained and not adequately aware of some of the scientific aspects of fire growth and spread, and it's not a situation where they're doing things maliciously or trying to put people away.
The state said there were 3 strong indicators proving the fire was started deliberately and not by accident. Professor Custer says they got them all wrong. First, burn patterns left on the carpet prove that petrol and paint thinners must have been used.
It's infrequently evidence of a liquid. It's more evidence of a burning carpet, and in fact carpets themselves are plastics, and when they burn they melt, and when they're melted they're liquids and they look like liquid pools.
The state said the balcony was so charred something must have been used to start the fire.
Well, it's definitely not proof of arson as such. The flames rolling out of the door during the fire, during the main part of the fire, would provide massive amounts of radiant energy that would cause charring on the wooden balcony.
The state said the speed and ferocity of the blaze confirmed it was arson.
There's plenty of heat available from a typical furniture fire to produce all of those features. So there is no classic set of simple arson patterns. One has to go to laboratory results to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that arson did exist.
The state crime laboratory's results have now been re-examined by one of America's leading forensic chemists. He says crucial errors were made in the analysis. Ordinary household products present in every home, like polish, were mistaken for paint thinners. In reality, there was no evidence of any known inflammable liquids in the samples taken from the apartment.
When I hear all that evidence and the strength of the evidence, I feel really angry. That he's still there, that no one will listen, that they're just totally ignoring it. He calls it his nightmare, and I can't imagine a nightmare like it, to be quite honest.
At first, Kenny Richey was represented by the local public defender. Now he's facing execution. A big city law firm have waived their fee to take his case. Karen's come to their office in Boston to find out why the new evidence failed to impress the appeal judges.
We lost because all they have is an affidavit, just a piece of paper. We don't really have a chance to put the witnesses on, let the witnesses be cross-examined, challenge the state's witnesses. Show them this evidence and say, hey, you testified at trial that this was caused by arson. But here are some people who are a lot more expert than you who say you're wrong. What do you say in light of what they said? How do you explain it?
The Ohio Senate has recently voted to reduce the number of appeals an inmate on death row is allowed. The senator who proposed the change has never been directly involved with the Kenny Richey case, but he thinks the system is still fair.
In the United States, we don't retry every case. We don't say, well, gee, we should have brought 4 or 5 different other experts, or we should have discussed it in a different way. I should have made a different closing argument. Maybe I shouldn't have taken the stand, or maybe I should have. You make those decisions at your trial. The Constitution of the United States affords you an opportunity to be tried in front of your peers. It doesn't afford you 10 opportunities every time you think it should have come out a little bit differently.
There's a strong backlash against sort of getting off on, quote, technicalities, close quote. I don't think this is a technicality. The evidence shows actual innocence.
But the appeal court ruled that
incompetency of an expert in and of itself is not a basis for reversal of conviction.
whatever the scientific evidence, the judges believe there was only one person who could have tampered with the smoke alarm, Kenny Richey. There were no witnesses or forensic evidence to support their theory, but they concluded Richey deserved to die because he deprived Cynthia Collins of any chance of rescue. Karen's come back to Ohio to try and find out more about Cynthia's mother, Hope, and the disconnected smoke alarm.
You know what happened with Hope with the smoke detector on the day of the fire?
Well, we were cooking dinner and in the apartments. We lived upstairs in the apartments. It always was real hot in the summertime. And as soon as you turned the oven on or had all the burners on the stove, the heat would automatically make the smoke detectors go off. So she undone it from the ceiling.
And you seen her do that?
Yes, I did.
No, did you tell the prosecutor or the
defense?
defense?
Yes, I told the prosecutor.
You know, because they say Kenny did this.
Yeah, I know they said that, but I seen her do it. You know, I was standing right there in the hallway when she done it.
The defense never explored the evidence about Hope Collins and the smoke alarm. They also failed to speak to the apartment's former maintenance man.
Hope Collins had a lot of parties in her apartment, and every time I went up there to do our maintenance checks, whatever, her smoke alarm would be disconnected or hanging down from the ceiling, which allowed the air to flow to it and not trap the smoke in there. I always had to put it back up.
At his trial, Kenny Richey's defense was provided for him by the state. His attorney not only failed to produce witnesses to testify that the child's own mother may have disconnected the smoke alarm, he also failed to call experts to dispute the prosecution claim that the fire had been started deliberately.
I didn't do the job correctly. And that's the bottom line. And I sure didn't know about them, and I sure didn't use them. Obviously, their testimony is substantially different from our own expert and the fire marshal.
It's a problem if you didn't present your evidence at the trial, where you were guaranteed a right of review under the United States Constitution of a jury of your peers on the evidence. If you fail to present the evidence, you'll have a problem.
The bottom line is, yeah, it bothers me. It bothers me a lot to think that someday Kenny Richey might have to pay the ultimate penalty. And it bothers me that I didn't even explore that area.
If you're just saying that there's more evidence on some other side and it wasn't submitted at the trial level, I can't help you. You failed to help yourself.
Before his conviction, Kenny Richey was offered the chance to plead guilty to a lesser charge and serve just 8 years in jail. If he'd taken the plea, he'd now be a free man.
He refused it because he refused to plead guilty to something he didn't do. Kenny would have been home, what, 4 or 5 years ago, if he took the plea. But he is adamant. You know, he doesn't want to tag child killer. You know, he did not do it.
Richey's original trial heard from 4 people who claimed that he'd made threats and boasts before the fire. For his supporters, their testimony is an uncomfortable reality, although 2 witnesses have now changed their story. The very man who was supposed to be one of the intended victims now says he doesn't believe that Richey was making threats to kill him before the blaze.
He wasn't in a rage. I mean, he wasn't, you know, I'm going to do this, but he looked at me when we was coming back upstairs. He looked at me and he said, "Good luck." And that was all he said, basically.
There was an outcry in this community about a little girl being dead. The police brought forward Kenny as the person who did it. And you know, that has an impact on people's memories and testimony about what happened.
Karen wanted to meet with the county prosecutor Dan Gershutz to talk about the new evidence, but he refused to meet her or be interviewed by World in Action. The state's crime laboratory also declined to discuss the scientific reports. The trial heard the fire must have been arson because there was no other explanation. But there was one possibility the court failed to consider. Cynthia Collins had a history of starting fires, including at least one in her home and one at her neighbor's.
I'd go to the bathroom and Hope was in the kitchen. You know you have your lighter and your cigarettes laying there, and you come back and your lighter's missing or your matches are missing. And Hope would go back in her bedroom and Cynthia would have them.
She did start a little fire, which I thought, as little as she was, how can she flick a lighter?
Cynthia had my cigarette and she dropped it on the couch. My couch is on fire. Hope thought it was funny.
It's known that people were in the apartment and smoking within 2 hours of this fire on that couch. And a second alternative would be the fact that the young girl had a history of fascination with fire.
Last week, Kenny Richey filed his latest appeal. He's now entering a desperate final lap to save his life. The British government is monitoring the case, but has yet to intervene. Despite having a Scottish mother and being raised in Edinburgh, Richey is treated as a US citizen because of his American father. While Jim Richey is allowed inside the jail, Karen is refused permission to visit.
I just don't understand this system over here at all. They went as far as saying I can come, and then saying, no, I can't. They play cat and mouse. Then they say I can't get on the visiting list, and these guys in here tell me I can. I really want to go back home. I feel totally distraught, to be quite honest. I've worked so hard. It would have just been nice to see him.
I believe in capital punishment. But I believe that every one of those people, if they have any sort of evidence that could exonerate them, it should be brought out. Now, we have so much evidence for Kenny to prove this innocence, and they're refusing it. Absolutely refusing it.
Kenny Richey was a hot-headed young man with a criminal record. He was drunk at the apartment hours before the blaze. But that seems to be all that's certain about the night that Cynthia Collins died. The scientific evidence that convicted him has been discredited by some of America's leading fire experts. The testimony of witnesses who say they heard Richey making threats is now in dispute. His supporters despair that a man could be sent to his death, with so many questions left unanswered.
I can't imagine with that fear and that terror. Plus the anger he must feel at being unjustly treated. Everyone knows what it's like to be accused of something you know you didn't do, and nobody will listen. And we're talking about trivial things. This is his life.
Will you sleep at night when Kenneth Richey goes to the electric chair?
Absolutely. He's been afforded justice under the United States Constitution, under the Constitution of the state of Ohio.
Let us show the evidence and let the people of this state judge. Let them say, hey, we want to kill him anyways, or that man should be free. This does not affect just the state, it affects everybody. It's a human life.